Hey everyone, welcome back to Little Jays Talk. Today we're going to be going over Max Scherzer's injury and what it means for the Blue Jays likely moving forward. So, for those of you that don't know, Max Scherzer's been having nerve issues in his thumb, and basically gripping the ball hurts him. And he's saying that he can get to around 50 pitches, and then after that he really feels it, and the following days are not comfortable. There's a lot of pain in that thumb. So when you're hearing that out of one of your starting pitchers, first of all, we all knew he had injury concerns, so it's kind of like try to load manage him and get him through to the playoffs. So whether that's 15 or 20 starts, whatever you have to do. I don't think anyone expected the guy to go 32 starts. But hearing the 50 pitch as being kind of the tipping point, that's troubling because that means that even when he is healthy, they're likely going to have to really load manage him and basically piggyback another pitcher with him, which you've got to kind of reserve one of your bullpen arms for that start day. So that's never, you never really like to hear that. It could mean we see some creative bullpen construction where maybe you're using Scherzer as an opener and just giving him a set pitch limit or a set inning count, get him through 3 innings, and then you're piggybacking him with a Yariel Rodriguez or a Ryan Yarbrough. But again, that means that you're like kind of reserving one of those bullpen spots to be ready for the Scherzer day, which I don't know how optimal that is. And I also don't know if they're having discussions with Scherzer about maybe moving to a bullpen role where he's able to give you 30 pitches twice a week or something like that, rather than trying to get 70 plus pitches in one outing and then getting hurt. If it truly is like the longer outings that seem to cause the damage, maybe you can work him into like a multi-inning role and then just give him a couple days in between. Again, it's not ideal, but with how effective he has looked in spring and how good of a pitcher he still appears to be, that might just be what they have to do to try and get good, solid quality innings out of him. And those are probably higher quality innings than they can get a lot of other places. But I wanted to go over what some of the alternatives are, whether he needs to start on the injured list or whether there needs to be piggybacking done this year, just some of the other options for multi-inning guys that we've got. Just scrolling down the 40-man first, and obviously Jake Bloss is a name that's intriguing. He looked really rough in his first couple outings of spring, but the last couple he's looked really good. And it's been against lower quality opposition, but he's also hitting the zone more with his pitches simultaneously. So yeah, lower competition or not, he's looked a lot more in control, and hopefully that will start to translate now that he seems to be settling in a little bit better. I highly doubt he breaks camp with the team. I think he's definitely like a double A, triple A guy. Maybe a couple months into the year, if he's really lighting things up, he could make his way back up like he did with Houston last year. But he's a little bit further away in my eyes. Continuing to scroll down, we've got the Easton Lucases, where he hasn't looked super awesome. I'd rather keep him in the minors, but I mean, if it gets dire enough, I guess we'll see. Yariel Rodriguez is the obvious one, and like I say, you could consider piggybacking them, or you could just plug Yariel Rodriguez into that fifth starter spot and move Scherzer to the bullpen if he's open to that. And like I say, just go 2 inning outings out of Scherzer a couple days a week, maybe. After that, it really starts to drop off. One name that is in the organization that's not on the 40-man currently is Eric Lauer, and he's only pitched 5 innings for us. He's averaging around 92, 93 miles an hour on his fastball, so it looks like he's added a little something from the last time we saw him in the majors. I believe he spent last year in the Korean Baseball League. I put a lot of faith in Pete Walker. He's worked with a lot of left-hand pitchers in specific, like the Robbie Rays, the Jay Haps, some guys like that. He's done some really nice work, actually, Yusei Kikuchi being a more recent one, where he's been able to really harness lefties in particular and get really good performance out of them, even if it's in a shorter time frame. Steven Matz is another guy that he was able to parlay into a big contract in St. Louis because of how good he looked in Toronto with Pete Walker. So even though when Eric Lauer got kind of beat up the last time we saw him in the majors and didn't necessarily pitch great last year, it appears he's added a couple miles per hour on his fastball, and just having that lefty whisperer in Pete Walker, there's potential there. And we're not talking about, ace level stuff or anything like that. We're talking about filling the number 5 spot in rotation. So it is, lower expectations. So when I say he can work with Pete Walker. What I mean is, get him up to pitching 4, 5, maybe 6 innings effectively over the first couple months of the year, if we're needing that depth in those innings, given the Scherzer injury. So he's one guy that I've really been impressed with so far this spring, albeit in 5 innings. But he's a guy that I'm thinking, down the stretch here over the next week, if they give him a start and you see him stretch out to 4 or 5 innings, that could be a way they're leaning to go. And there's going to be a lot of roster shuffling done down the stretch here as well. There's going to be a lot of teams where they've got roster crunches. You see it with the Blue Jays bullpen, with the Tommy Nance. We had Easton Lucas competing for a spot. We've got Pardino, guys like that. Like, there's a lot of guys that are not just competing for spots on their own team, but they're competing for spots around the league. And there's going to be a lot of shuffling, guys getting optioned, guys that are out of options that have no spot for them, teams that are going to be looking to make trades for some of these lower roster guys, where they don't necessarily want to lose them for nothing, but they'll swap them for, say, out of our infield depth. Maybe we can get a deal done there with another team and kind of, maybe you see like a Leo Jimenez or something like that go for a half decent, promising young arm in a different organization. You never know. There's a lot of shuffling that could potentially be done here. And I know teams are normally reluctant to give up starting pitching depth. But if you see something in a young guy that maybe isn't quite getting the results yet, but the Blue Jays like a trait of his, that is a path that we could see going. And I won't even speculate on names there because it's much too wide open. There's way too many guys to pick from. Way too much random stuff can happen. But that's just what I'd like to point out as an alternative, because it does tend to happen every year where bullpen arms, maybe some long relievers, maybe some guys that have been bouncing around and they're a little bit older now, that Jays are kind of forced to take a couple dart throws there on something that they like in a guy. And you never know. Sometimes those work out. So yeah, that's really what I wanted to touch on today. Scherzer injury, not ideal at all. It'll be interesting to see how they manage it going forward, whether they entertain an opener role for him, whether they try to burn him out and then throw him on the injured list and then rinse and repeat later in the year. And who I see potentially in-house. I see the Yariel Rodriguez, Jake Bloss, and then maybe even a dark horse being Eric Lauer, because he has looked quite good. So what do you guys think about the injury? What do you think the Jays should do? Do you think that we should, spend the prospects now, spend some of these Addison Bargers, Joey Loperfidos, Alan Rodens, and go after a Dylan Cease or just another starting pitcher in a different org? What do you think the path forward should be? Let me know in the comments. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.